writers, I'm so excited to have Julie Fearn with us today for our next prompt to publication. Julie's here to tell us a little bit about her book, and I'm very, very excited to have her here with us. Julie, do you want to start off and you just tell us a little bit about who you are, tell us about your family, and what do you do when you're not writing, all kinds of fun stuff. Who are you?
Okay. It's awful, isn't it, getting asked who you are? I live in England. I'm retired. I've always been interested in writing, but it wasn't until sort of towards my retirement that I started to study creative writing and take it seriously. So I've had 2 short stories published, both in different anthologies, and Northern Pole, which is my novel, is my first novel, and I wrote it because a friend suggested 52 deadlines to me, and I went on the website, and it was absolutely the perfect vehicle to write your first novel.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about the book, about the story.
Okay, the story, it's based loosely on my family history, but I have invented a lot because there are lots of gaps. But the story is that it's about a young Polish guy who, he's 14 when the Second World War breaks out, and his family get sort of arrested and they all get split up. And then he arrives after the war in England as a displaced person and begins a new life and continues to search for his family, although he doesn't know whether they are alive or dead. He meets a young woman called Bridget, and they fall passionately in love. Roman's quite volatile, and he sometimes creates problems for himself. Anyway, he meets Bridget, and then he manages to link up with his mother, find out that she's alive, and she's actually in a displaced persons camp in England where he is. And they meet up, and then all hell breaks loose. So that's kind of roughly it. It is. I think I said it is partly based on my family's history. And actually what happened was, first of all, I wrote it as a play. There were too many characters in it and it was far too unwieldy. When I finished it, I realized that I actually really wanted to, Roman, who's the principal protagonist of the novel, was just one character amongst many in the play. But when I finished it, I realized I wanted to tell Roman's story. So it began that way. During that period, I'd inherited some documents that were originally, it was a suitcase of documents. They were Polish documents. They arrived in England via my grandmother, my father's mother. She'd gone all over Europe with this suitcase of things, and I don't know how she did it, but she brought it to England. And when she died in the displaced persons camp, my dad sort of got her suitcase, and it was kind of, we never really knew what was in it when we were kids. Anyway, he died, and then my mum died, and I got hold of the suitcase, and there were loads of letters and ID documents and certificates and marriage certificates, baptism certificates, all kinds of things. Some in Polish, everything in Polish, some of the certificates in Latin. So I went about having them translated into English, and as a different story emerged of what had happened to my dad. And it wasn't total, there were just snippets. So what I did was I then fed them into my novel. I rearranged the information, but I used them in the novel. So that was like a journey in itself. So that was a really exciting and very moving thing to do as well, because I found out things that none of us knew in our family. So it was kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. It sounds amazing. I mean, what would you do with such a suitcase and then to write about it? It sounds fantastic.
I know.
Um, Tell me a little bit, Joe. You've mentioned short stories, you've mentioned plays, and now a novel. How did you end up as a writer?
Um, I think I always wanted to write, and I really loved writing. And I think uh, I, the job that I did after I graduated a long time ago, the jobs that I did didn't really involve writing. At one point, I
Mm-hmm,
was a policy writer in HR, which was like a very sort of strict use of language, very, very formal.
mm-hmm,
But I was still scribbling away sort of creatively in my spare time. And it was, as I said, in my sort of mid-50s, I went to a creative writing class in the evening, and it kind of kicked off there, I think, and I started to realise, A, that, I wasn't as terrible as I thought, and B, that I could write, and that you could learn to write, that there were lots of sort of technicalities that you needed to know about. But so it really sort of started from there. And probably like a lot of writers, I told myself that I wasn't writing for an audience. In fact, when I began writing, I didn't even think about an audience. It was just indulging myself. That was when I was much younger. So I started to sort of study creative writing and take it seriously. And it grew from there. But at that point, I was still telling myself that I was just doing it as a hobby. I think. And I think eventually, when I did a like a postgraduate diploma online, and when I finished that, it was from York University, and I submitted one of my stories called The Baba Yaga Tree, and they published it in the Students' Anthology.
well
Um,
done.
and I was very pleased about that, because there was something like 300 applicants and only like 50 stories. So it wasn't just a case of if you'd been on the course, you automatically were. So it was selected. So that gave me a real boost. And I think at that point, and that's probably, it's about 6, 7 years ago now, I'm not totally sure, that made me realize that I really should start trying to write for
Mm-hmm.
publication and, come out as a writer. So,
Sure.
yeah. And then I've been part of a writing group for nearly 10 years in York, and
Mm-hmm.
we recently published an anthology, and I've got a short story in there, and that's called
Great.
Good Friday.
That's lovely. You mentioned that you love writing. I think we're all here because we love writing, but do you find writing energizes you or drains you?
I think it does both, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely energizes me, and it's wonderful to sort of go off into a world that you've created, and just get lost in it, and it just sort of unfolds itself. And I absolutely love that magical thing about writing. But it is also incredibly draining. I think it can be very emotionally draining. For myself, I like to, when I read, I like to be engaged emotionally by the characters. I have to care about them. Um, and when I write, I want my characters to be cared about by the people who read it. And I think that is quite an emotionally draining thing, particularly in my novel, where I was straying into Aid My Family History, which is fairly sort of turbulent and traumatic. And just, I think, putting yourself in the shoes of your characters, absolutely, and feeling their emotions and writing their emotions, it is incredibly draining.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you sometimes need to have to take a break afterwards. But it's just also a magical process.
It is true magic. Do you do any other creative pursuits that feed, or do you have any other creative pursuits that feed your writing? Any hobbies, anything else that one feeds the other? How does it work for you?
I used to do a fair amount of painting, watercolors and acrylics, but I reached a point where it was I either had to take the writing seriously or the painting seriously. So I chose writing, but I do dabble painting sometimes, and I absolutely love. I'm quite a visual person, so I absolutely love going to the cinema and seeing films and going to art galleries and looking at paintings and things like that. So, because I think I really like the link between the arts. There's a thing called ekphrasis, isn't there, where one
Mm-hmm.
art form feeds off another. And
Mm-hmm.
I really, really like that. I know a long time ago, I was on a course where we had to write about a piece of art that we were inspired by, and that was a really wonderful sort of thing to do.
Wonderful. Tell us a bit about your publishing journey. When did you decide you were ready? How did you go about it? What did you do?
Okay. When I joined 52 Writers, I had decided then that I was going to write a novel and I was going to try and get that novel published. It wasn't just going to be, for pleasure for me, because it's a slog, isn't it? It's hard work. It's a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful process, but it's hard work. So I decided that. Towards the end of the journey, done the first draft and the second draft on deadlines for writers. Then I was kind of alone, but by myself, and I was editing my work. And at that point, I wrote my synopsis and cover letter, and had a section of the novel that was fit for purpose. And I started to send that out to publishers to gauge the reaction. Um, it was varied. I mean, it was positive. The first publisher that got back to me said, it's really well written, it's a fantastic story, but we're not taking on any new writers. And that was kind of the story that kept coming back, or some publishers would come back. These were, publishing houses, but small independent ones. And they would come back and they would say, we're not taking any new writers for 2 years, contact us again in 2 or 3 years. And I just felt like I don't want to wait that long, and life's too short kind of thing. So I'll go on the independent publishing route. So I paid to have my novel proofed and edited. And then I paid a different sort of small independent company to format it for ebook
Mm-hmm.
and paperback. And a friend of mine who's quite good at graphic design designed the cover, some of which you can see behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up a few weeks ago with the whole package being uploaded onto KDP on the Amazon site, Kindle Direct Publishing. So I would have liked to have been backed by a publishing house, but it's quite hard work, sort of
Mm-hmm.
getting to that stage. What I might do is, depending on the success of my novel, is in a few months' time actually submit it to a publisher as, it's readily, the whole thing is, it's a package here, would you like to publish it?
Mm-hmm.
And see what happens. So I haven't completely
Okay.
given up on that route, but so at the moment, a lot of my time is spent promoting
Okay.
my novel on all available platforms. Um,
Okay.
so I've been on the local radio twice. Been on a BBC
Exciting.
local radio, which was a great interview actually. And the guy who interviewed me I was really shocked. He was halfway through my novel. He'd read it sort of the night before, and he was really enthusiastic about it. And he was saying, "Oh, it's a page turner, and it's thrilling, and it's very sort of cinematic. I can imagine it as a film." And I was just absolutely, amazed.
Wonderful.
So it was a really fun interview, because obviously I was very nervous because it was a live interview. because I'd done one with a different radio show a couple of days previously, but that was one where we Zoom chatted and then he was going to edit it, which he did, whereas the BBC one was, you know, totally live, and I fluffed it. I think I called my Kindle my candle. But, you
It's
know,
okay.
yeah, you know, I'm human, and the guy that interviewed me was great. So,
Awesome.
yeah, and I'm got a newsletter and a website set up, and I'm trying to encourage people to join my newsletter and keep them informed about the progress of Northern Pole. And now realise that I need to start thinking about the next novel.
Never ending.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is.
Um,
I've
Tell
got
me,
an idea. Mhm.
yeah, what do you consider to be publishing success or literary success in your mind? When would you say, I've done it, this is awesome?
For me, when people give me feedback and say that they really enjoyed reading my novel, that they felt and cared for the characters, and I think that the most rewarding thing that someone said so far is that when they finished the novel, they couldn't stop thinking about the characters. And for me, that's absolute success, because for myself, uh, I read a lot. All writers read. You read tons, and sadly, you forget quite a lot. And when you've written characters that people think about and remember, to me, that's the highest accolade possible. So for me, that is success. It would be wonderful to shift a couple of hundred copies of my novel. So far, I think I've sold 57.
Well done. That's good.
So we'll see. But yeah, I think really for me, reaching people's hearts and minds, and then, you know, remembering what you've written about and it stirring something in them, to me, that's success. It's not about money or, you know, all the other stuff, because I don't think that's realistic to begin with. Publishing has changed so much. It's a very different ball to what it used to be. But I think, yeah, to be recognized as a writer and to engage with people.
Okay. Solid goals. I like those. Tell me quickly, what was like the hardest part to write? Did anything not make it into the final copy of the book? Anything that you put in? But what was like a difficult part for you? Did you end up using it, not using it?
I did. I took out. It's hard to think now, but I had to take out sort of certain things. The hardest part for me in my novel was, it's the background is the Second World War and the Holocaust, but I don't write about that. That appears very, very briefly in one tiny scene, and the reference is 2 sentences, and that was enough to get the absolute horror across because of what I've written. But that was really, really hard on so many levels, because like feeling qualified to write about something so enormous, even though it's just a sentence, and just all the sensitivities around, you know, the whole thing. So that was hard.
Okay. Yeah. The emotional impact is sometimes something we underestimate.
Yes, I think it is.
Yeah, you mentioned reading. What do you like reading?
I read across the board, actually. One of my favourite authors is Elizabeth Strout.
Okay.
I absolutely love her books, the way that she writes about sort of the different kind of emotional dynamics and gradations and movements, you know, that people have. She's absolutely fantastic. She's one of my favourite authors. I read a lot of, I do read thrillers. I read quite a lot of popular thrillers, fiction. I read literary, so-called, you know, literary fiction. I did really enjoy Donna Tartt's, the one about the painting. Again,
Yeah.
dreadful. I think for me, one of the problems with reading things on Kindle and being a bit older is that because you don't see the book titles, you don't see the book cover, you don't see the author's name, I tend to forget sometimes that, you know, what I've read or what the title is. But I do like, again, to be engaged by, it's great. I enjoy psychological thrillers, but I really like it when I'm completely invested emotionally in the character. But contemporary fiction is probably what, you know, mostly what I read. I do read classic fiction as well. I read something recently, which again, I'm going to forget the name of it. It's dreadful. It's a sort of 19th century novel, and it's probably it's about a guy sort of ghosting or gaslighting a woman. And it was absolutely so engaging, and I really enjoyed the different type of language that was used, because it's the 19th century, or it might have been very early sort of 20th century. It just took me into a completely different world. So that was really good fun, and I'm so ashamed that I can't remember the name of the author.
Don't worry.
And it's really famous.
Oh, you can always let me know. We'll add it in the comments on your post.
Yeah.
Okay. Two more questions. What was your favorite book as a child?
I didn't actually start reading until I was like a late teenager. But actually properly, I mean, you know, reading regularly. But I think my favorite book as a child has to be Treasure Island, because I absolutely love Robert Louis Stevenson. It's hard to believe that he's the same person that wrote Dr. Hyde. His life is absolutely fantastic. His life story is amazing. So it was Treasure Island, and the characters that he creates, you know, particularly in the first half, they're just so larger than life.
Wonderful. Okay. And do you have any advice for writers who are starting out or it's at the beginning of their journey? What would you say to them?
Absolutely. I would say, if you really want to write and you've a story that moves you, then do it. Stick with it. It's hard work, but it's also incredibly rewarding. And actually, it's really fun as well. There is a fun element to it. And I would say, believe in yourself. You know, listen to, you know, your inner core, because we're all writers, I think. We've all got so many self-doubts, haven't we? One day you think, oh, that's okay. And then the next day you think, oh my God, that's terrible. You know, who would want to read that and what have you? And we go on these emotional roller coasters of sort of self-belief and self-doubt and what have you. But I would say to someone, if you really want to write, then stick at it and do it. And I would also say to someone, if someone came to me and said, I want to write a novel, but I'm not sure what to do, I would say, go on Mia's Deadline for Writers, because it is such, I would not have written my novel if I hadn't have gone on your course. There's no way I wouldn't have got round to it, because it's an enormous task, and it seems an enormous task, but the way the course is run and structured, it's fantastic, because you do it in bite-sized chunks. And you learn, you know, bit by bit, sort of the things that you need to know, and it's never overwhelming, and it's so supportive, and the feedback from other writers. It's a fantastic way to write your first draft and your second draft and your third draft. And don't tell people that at the beginning, that they might be rewriting.
Yeah, that's a secret. It only comes later.
That's a secret, absolutely.
Oh goodness. No, Julie, it's wonderful. No, congratulations. I think you've done something wonderful here. It's really fantastic. And like you said, it's about writing it one little bit at a time and not getting overwhelmed by the big part of the story, the bigness of the undertaking. So congratulations. I'm going to share this in the blog post, and then everyone can find you on the site and hopefully go find you on social media as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Mia. Thank you sincerely for running such a wonderful course. It's fabulous.
It's such a pleasure. Okay. Thanks for joining us, Julie.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye.